The mail truck screeched to a halt outside my quiet suburban home, and I watched, frozen, as the postman dumped a mountain of cream-colored envelopes onto my porch. Each one was addressed to me, but the elegant script inside announced my sister's wedding, at my address, on my property, in 3 weeks. My heart pounded as I realized my family had turned my life into their stage without a single word of consent. I'm Clara, 35, a high school teacher who cherishes her small, orderly world in Maplewood, New Jersey. My cozy 2-bedroom house, with its rose garden and creaky porch swing, is my sanctuary. I've spent years carving out this piece after a childhood of chaos, raised by parents who treated boundaries like suggestions. My younger sister, Emily, 30, is their golden child. Charming, impulsive, and perpetually excused. When she got engaged to Tom, a slick real estate agent, I was thrilled for her. But I never imagined they'd hijack my home for their dream wedding. The first envelope I opened felt like a punch. Join us at Clara's garden for the wedding of Emily Harper and Tom Reynolds, it declared, as if I'd volunteered my backyard. My phone buzzed with texts from cousins I hadn't seen in years, gushing about how perfect my place would be. I called Emily, my hands shaking. "Clara, it's no big deal," she said, her voice breezy. "Your yard's huge, and Mom said you wouldn't mind. We sent out 150 invites already. It's too late to change." Too late. My blood boiled. My mother, Diane, 60, was the mastermind, I knew it. She'd always assumed my life was hers to orchestrate. When I called her, she laughed it off. "Clara, don't be selfish. It's your sister's big day." Selfish? I'd spent my savings on that garden, tending every rose, every blade of grass. Now, it was to be trampled by strangers for a wedding I didn't agree to host. I sat on my porch, staring at the pile of invitations, my sanctuary violated before the first guest even arrived. I could have canceled it all, called every guest, exposed the audacity. But Emily's tearful voice echoed in my mind, and despite everything, I loved her. I didn't want her wedding ruined, but I couldn't let this slide. An idea sparked, one that would teach them all a lesson without breaking my sister's heart. The next morning, I drove to Emily's apartment, invitations in hand. She opened the door, her bridal glow dimmed by my glare. "Clara, I'm sorry," she started, but I cut her off. "You don't get to apologize after the fact. You and Mom planned this behind my back. If you want my yard, there are rules." Her eyes widened as I laid out my terms. No more than 50 guests, no catering trucks tearing up my lawn, and they'd pay for every cent of cleanup. She nodded, stunned, but I wasn't done. I called a family meeting that night. Mom, Dad, Emily, and Tom, all crammed into my living room. The air was thick with tension. "You assumed my home was yours to use," I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "If this wedding happens here, it's on my terms, or I'll call every guest and tell them it's off." Mom scoffed, but Dad, always the peacemaker, nodded. "Fair enough, Clara," he said. Emily looked like she might cry, but Tom just smirked, as if this was all a game. Over the next week, I became a reluctant wedding planner. I rented chairs, coordinated with vendors, and set strict boundaries. No fireworks, no loud music after 9 p.m., Emily complained, but I held firm. My home wasn't a free venue, it was mine. Yet, as the days passed, I felt a flicker of excitement. Maybe I could make this work, turn their chaos into something beautiful. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. My family's disregard for my boundaries had cracked something open, and I wasn't sure if love alone could mend it. By the end of the week, my backyard was half transformed. String lights hung above the roses, a small arch where Emily would say her vows. But as I surveyed the scene, my phone rang. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, her voice sharp. "Clara, why are there catering trucks blocking my driveway? And who's this wedding coordinator saying your house is booked for 200 guests?" My heart sank. Emily had lied. Again. The betrayal stung sharper than I expected. I stood in my kitchen, gripping my phone as Mrs. Callahan's words echoed. 200 guests. Emily had promised 50, but she'd gone behind my back, inflating the guest list and hiring a coordinator without telling me. My home, my sanctuary, was being turned into a circus, and I was the unwilling ringmaster. I marched to Emily's apartment, the stack of invitations burning a hole in my bag. When she opened the door, her smile faltered. "Clara, what's wrong?" she asked, as if she didn't know. I held up a new invitation I'd found in the pile, one that boasted 200 guests under the stars at Clara's garden. Her face paled. "I can explain," she stammered, "but I wasn't here for excuses." "You lied," I said, my voice low but trembling with fury. "You promised 50 guests. You hired a coordinator without asking me. Do you have any idea what this feels like?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. Not this time. Tom appeared behind her, his usual smirk replaced by a nervous glance. "Clara, it's just a wedding," he said. "We'll handle it." Handle it? They'd already handled my life into chaos. I drove home, my mind racing. I could cancel the whole thing, send out a mass email, expose their deceit. But as I pulled into my driveway, I saw my roses, their petals glowing in the dusk. This was my home. I wouldn't let their recklessness destroy it. Instead, I'd take control. I called the coordinator, a perky woman named Jenna, and laid down the law. 50 guests, no exceptions, or the venue was off. She hesitated but agreed when I threatened to shut it all down. The next day, I met with Mom at her favorite coffee shop, hoping to understand why she'd enabled this. She sipped her latte, her silver hair catching the light, and sighed. "Clara, Emily's always dreamed of a big wedding. Your yard's perfect. Why can't you just help?" Her words cut deep. Help? I'd been helping my whole life, bailing Emily out of messes, cleaning up after Mom's grand plans. "Because it's my home, Mom," I said. "You don't get to decide what happens in it." She looked away, her face softening for a moment, but then she doubled down. "You're being dramatic. It's one day that could ruin my garden, my peace, my trust in them." I left the coffee shop feeling more alone than ever. My family saw my boundaries as obstacles, not rights. Back home, I threw myself into damage control. I called every vendor, confirming they'd stick to my rules. The caterer grumbled about the guest cap, but I didn't budge. I spent hours rearranging my backyard, moving delicate plants to safety, and setting up barriers to protect my lawn. It was exhausting, but it felt like reclaiming my space. Still, the weight of Emily's lie pressed on me. How could I love someone who treated me like this? As the wedding drew closer, tension simmered. Emily sent half-hearted apologies via text, but she avoided me in person. Tom, meanwhile, kept pushing for just a few more guests, as if my rules were negotiable. I started to wonder if this wedding was worth saving. But then I remembered Emily as a kid, twirling in our backyard, dreaming of her big day. I hated how much I still cared. By Friday, my backyard looked like a wedding magazine, white roses woven into the arch, fairy lights twinkling. It was beautiful, but it wasn't mine anymore. That night, I found a note slipped under my door from Mrs. Callahan. "Clara, I'm sorry for snapping. Let me help." Her kindness cracked something in me. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. But as I went to bed, my phone lit up with a new text from Jenna, the coordinator. "Emily just added 50 more chairs. What do I do?" The text from Jenna hit like a betrayal I should have seen coming. 50 more chairs? Emily wasn't just bending my rules, she was shattering them. I stood in my kitchen, the glow of my phone casting shadows on the walls, and felt my resolve harden. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. It was about respect, or the lack of it, that my family had shown me my entire life. I called Jenna immediately. "Remove the extra chairs," I said, my voice icy. "If Emily tries to override me again, the wedding's off." Jenna stammered an apology, promising to fix it. But as I hung up, I knew this wasn't just about chairs. It was about my sister thinking she could steamroll me, just like Mom always had. I wasn't going to let it happen. The next morning, I confronted Emily at her dress fitting. The boutique was all lace and champagne flutes, but the air between us was heavy. "Clara, I didn't mean to upset you," she said, her voice small as she stood in her wedding gown. "We just got carried away." Carried away? I wanted to scream. Instead, I leaned in, my words sharp. "You don't get to get carried away with my home. You've got one last chance, Emily. Stick to 50 guests, or I'm done." She nodded, tears welling, but I wasn't sure I believed her. Tom, lurking nearby, rolled his eyes. "Clara, "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. I ignored him. This wasn't his fight. But as I left, I caught Emily's reflection in the mirror. Beautiful, fragile, and utterly unaware of the damage she'd caused. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Was I being too harsh? Then I remembered the 150 invitations, the lies, the extra chairs. No, I was done being the doormat. Back home, I enlisted Mrs. Callahan's help. She was a retired event planner, and her sharp eyes missed nothing. Together, we patrolled my backyard, ensuring every detail matched my rules. She suggested adding a small guest book table to keep things intimate, a touch that made me smile. "You're stronger than you know, Clara," she said, patting my arm. Her words stayed with me, a reminder that I wasn't just fighting for my yard, but for my right to be heard. The day before the wedding, chaos erupted. A delivery truck arrived with a massive tent, unapproved, unordered, and definitely not fitting my small and simple mandate. I called Emily, who admitted Mom had ordered it just in case. Just in case? I was livid. I tracked down Mom at her house, where she was arranging flowers like nothing was wrong. "Clara, stop overreacting," she said, snipping a rose stem. "A tent's practical. Practical for whom? Not for my garden, which would be crushed under its weight." I took a deep breath. "Mom, you don't get to decide what's practical for my home. The tent goes, or the wedding does." For the first time, she looked shaken. Dad, overhearing, stepped in. "Clara's right, Diane. We overstepped." It was the first time he'd ever backed me up so firmly. Mom relented, and the tent was sent back, but the victory felt hollow. Why did I have to fight so hard for something so basic? As night fell, I walked through my backyard, the fairy lights casting a soft glow. It was beautiful, despite everything. But the weight of the past weeks pressed on me. Emily's lies, Mom's dismissals, the constant battle to be seen. I sat on my porch swing, wondering if I could ever forgive them. Then Mrs. Callahan appeared, holding a glass of wine. "Tomorrow's the big day," she said. "You've done everything you can. Now make it yours." Her words sparked something. Maybe I could reclaim this wedding, not just for Emily, but for me. Wedding day dawned bright and merciless, the sun exposing every flaw in my carefully curated backyard. I woke at 5 a.m., my stomach churning, knowing today would test every boundary I'd fought to set. By 7 a.m., vendors were swarming my lawn, and I was already putting out fires, literally, when a caterer's grill flared too close to my roses. Mrs. Callahan was my lifeline, her sharp commands keeping the chaos in check. We counted chairs, exactly 50, as I demanded. But as guests began arriving, I noticed unfamiliar faces, far more than 50. My heart sank. Emily had done it again. I found her near the arch, radiant in her white dress, laughing with Tom. "Clara, isn't it perfect?" she gushed, oblivious to my rising anger. I pulled her aside. "There are at least 80 people here. You promised 50. Her smile vanished. I couldn't uninvite people," she whispered. "They're already here." I wanted to scream, but the guests were watching, their chatter filling the air. I couldn't ruin her day, not yet. Instead, I turned to Jenna, the coordinator, who was frantically checking her clipboard. "Cap it now," I said. "No more entries." She nodded, scurrying off to block the gate. The ceremony began, and despite everything, it was beautiful. Emily walked down the aisle, my garden path, her eyes shining as she met Tom. I stood at the back, arms crossed, torn between love for my sister and fury at her betrayal. Mom caught my eye, her expression a mix of pride and guilt. Dad squeezed my hand, whispering, "You made this happen, Clara." But I hadn't wanted this. Not like this. After the vows, the reception kicked off, and the real chaos began. Guests spilled onto my lawn, trampling grass I'd spent years nurturing. A cousin knocked over a table, shattering a vase. I bit my tongue, directing caterers and keeping the crowd contained. Mrs. Callahan, ever vigilant, helped me steer drunk uncles away from my flower beds. But then I overheard Tom laughing with a friend. "Clara's so uptight. It's just a party. Just a party." My home was just a party to him. I was about to confront him when Mom pulled me aside. "Clara, let it go," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Emily's happy. Isn't that enough?" "Enough?" The word ignited something in me. No, Mom. It's not enough. You all used me, and you think I should just smile. Her face fell, but she didn't argue. For once, she had no defense. As the evening wore on, I took charge. I redirected guests to a roped-off area, saving what was left of my garden. I turned down the music when it hit 9 p.m., ignoring Tom's protests. And when a group of latecomers tried to crash the gate, I stood firm, telling Jenna to send them away. The guests whispered, some calling me controlling, but I didn't care. This was my home, and I was done apologizing for protecting it. By 10 p.m., the party was winding down. Emily found me, her mascara smudged from dancing. "Clara, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't realize how much this hurt you." For the first time, she seemed to see me, not as her big sister who'd always fix things, but as a person with her own rights. I wanted to believe her, but the damage was done. As the last guests left, I looked at my trampled lawn, my heart heavy. Tomorrow, I'd clean up. But tonight, I needed to decide what family meant to me. The morning after the wedding, my backyard looked like a battlefield. Crushed flowers, scattered cups, and muddy footprints marred what was once my sanctuary. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, fighting the urge to cry. Emily and Tom were off on their honeymoon, but the mess they'd left, literal and emotional, was mine to clean. Mrs. Callahan arrived with a thermos of tea and a determined smile. "We'll fix this, Clara," she said, handing me a pair of gardening gloves. Together, we salvaged what we could, replanting snapped roses, raking the lawn, hauling debris. As we worked, she shared stories of her own family's oversteps, her voice warm with understanding. "You stood up for yourself," she said. By noon, Mom and Dad showed up, unannounced. Mom carried a tray of muffins, her usual peace offering. "We thought we'd help clean," she said, her tone tentative. I nodded, too tired to argue. Dad grabbed a broom, but Mom hovered, her eyes scanning the damage. "Clara, we didn't mean for this," she said finally. "We got carried away." It was the closest she'd come to an apology, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. As we worked, I laid out my feelings. "You and Emily treated my home like it was yours to use," I said, pulling weeds with more force than necessary. "You didn't ask. You didn't care." Mom's face crumpled, but she listened. Dad, sweeping nearby, added, "We messed up, Clara. I should have stopped it." His honesty caught me off guard. For the first time, I felt they might actually hear me. By late afternoon, the yard was starting to look like mine again. Mrs. Callahan suggested a barbecue to reclaim the space, and I agreed, inviting a few neighbors. It was small, intimate, the opposite of the wedding's chaos. As we laughed over burgers, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe my home could be my sanctuary again. But Emily's absence gnawed at me. She hadn't called, hadn't texted. Was she avoiding me, or just lost in her newlywed bliss? That evening, I found a letter in my mailbox, Emily's handwriting on the envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. "Clara," it began, "I was wrong. I saw your house as a venue, not your home. I'm so sorry." She promised to make it right when she returned, help with repairs, pay for damages. It was a start, but trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. I sat on my porch swing, rereading her words. The fairy lights still hung above, a reminder of the wedding I hadn't wanted. I thought about our childhood, Emily's wild dreams, my quiet sacrifices. I'd always been the responsible one, cleaning up her messes. But this time, I'd drawn a line, and it felt like a victory, however painful. As the sun set, Mrs. Callahan joined me, her presence steadying. "What now?" she asked. I didn't have an answer. I wanted to forgive Emily, to rebuild with Mom and Dad, but I needed them to respect me first. "I'll keep my boundaries," I said finally. "And I'll make them listen." She smiled, raising her glass. "To Clara's garden," she said. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling the weight of the past weeks lift, just a little. A week after the wedding, Emily returned from her honeymoon, tanned and glowing, but nervous as she stepped onto my porch. I'd been dreading this moment, unsure if her letter's promises would hold. She hugged me tightly, her voice shaky. "Clara, I meant what I wrote. Let me fix this." I nodded, wary but willing to hear her out. We sat in my living room, the air heavy with unspoken words. I was selfish, she admitted, twisting her new wedding ring. I saw your yard and thought it was perfect, but I didn't think about you. Her honesty disarmed me. For years, I'd carried her mistakes, but this was the first time she'd owned one so fully. What's your plan? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She outlined her offer. She and Tom would pay for a landscaper to restore my garden, replace damaged plants, and cover any other costs. And I want to help replant, she added. I want to understand what this place means to you. I was skeptical. Emily wasn't exactly the gardening type, but her eyes were earnest. I agreed, but with a condition. She had to respect my boundaries going forward, no exceptions. The next day, a landscaper arrived, and Emily showed up in jeans, ready to work. Mom and Dad joined us later, bringing lunch and cautious smiles. Mom was quieter than usual, her usual defensiveness gone. I'm proud of you, Clara, she said as we ate. You stood your ground. It was the apology I'd been waiting for, however indirect. Dad chimed in. We'll do better. I wanted to believe them, but trust would take time. As the weeks passed, my garden bloomed again, stronger than before. Emily kept her promise, checking in regularly, even helping me prune on weekends. Tom was less involved, but he footed the bills without complaint. Slowly, I began to let go of the anger that had consumed me. But I didn't forget. I set new rules for family gatherings. No unannounced plans, no assumptions about my space. To my surprise, they listened. One evening, Mrs. Callahan hosted a neighborhood potluck in her yard, inviting me and my family. It was a chance to show Emily and my parents what a gathering could be when planned with respect. We laughed, shared stories, and for once, I felt like part of a team, not a servant. Emily pulled me aside as the night ended. I'm learning, Clara, she said. Thank you for not giving up on me. I hugged her, tears prickling. Maybe we could rebuild. By month's end, my garden was my sanctuary again, its roses vibrant under the autumn sun. I sat on my porch swing, reflecting on the chaos of the wedding. It had exposed cracks in my family, but it had also forced us to face them. I'd learned to stand up for myself, to demand respect without guilt. And in doing so, I'd found a strength I hadn't known I had. Months after the wedding, my life settled into a new rhythm. My garden thrived, its roses a testament to the work Emily and I had put in. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was honest. She called before visiting, asked before assuming, and slowly, I began to trust her again. Mom and Dad followed suit, their apologies turning into actions, small gestures, like asking my opinion or respecting my space. One crisp fall day, I hosted a family dinner, my first since the wedding. It was small, just Emily, Tom, Mom, Dad, and Mrs. Callahan, who'd become like family. I set the table in my backyard, under the fairy lights that had survived the chaos. As we ate, Emily raised her glass. To Clara, she said, her voice steady, for teaching us what home really means. Everyone toasted, and for the first time in years, I felt seen. Tom, usually so flippant, added, I was wrong about you, Clara. You're tough. It wasn't much, but coming from him, it mattered. Mom reached for my hand, her eyes soft. We're lucky to have you, she said. I smiled, the weight of the past lifting a little more. Dad, ever quiet, just nodded, but his pride was clear. As the evening wound down, I walked Mrs. Callahan home. She'd been my rock, and I told her so. You didn't need me, Clara, she said. You had the strength all along. Her words stayed with me as I returned to my porch, the stars bright above my garden. I thought about the wedding, the betrayal, the fight, the healing. It had been a storm, but it had shown me who I was. I'd always been the fixer, the one who smoothed things over. But this time, I'd chosen myself. I'd protected my home, my heart, and in doing so, I taught my family to see me differently. They weren't perfect, and neither was I, but we were learning, and that was enough. The next spring, Emily asked to host a small anniversary party in my yard. Just 20 people, she promised, and only with my permission. I said yes, but this time, I set the terms from the start. We planned it together, laughing over coffee as we sketched out a simple setup. When the day came, My garden glowed, not just with roses, but with something deeper, trust, rebuilt one small step at a time. As I sat on my porch swing that night, watching Emily and Tom dance under the lights, I felt a quiet peace. My home was mine again, but it was also a place where family could grow, if they respected it. The journey had been painful, but it had taught me that boundaries aren't just walls, they're bridges to better relationships. And in my garden, under the stars, I knew I'd found my way home.